And this is Courtney was the one who jumped into the chat room last time, and she's been fun to kind of to watch her interaction because she does consider herself Hebrew roots. I would classify myself as Hebrew roots, I guess. However, I'm 100% certain that most people have no clue what it is that we Hebrew roots believe. The reason I can say this confidently is because Rob mentioned that we call ourselves Hebrew roots, so we must or should all know Hebrew. While I did take the time to learn biblical Hebrew and can read, slow but can, not all are like that. However, let it be known that it is not the reason we call ourselves that. We call ourselves this because we are saying this is the original faith. Abraham was first called a Hebrew when he crossed over, quote, crossed over, and left behind the ways of his upbringing. He trusted in God, leaving behind everything and moving into a tent with a dirt floor. His faith was not based on works, not based on balancing his good works and his weakness. His faith was solely, in caps, solely that that the God he trusted in would justify him. In that, Abraham obeyed God. In short, we are not Jewish, we are Hebrew, because the difference between the two is all Jews are Hebrews, but not all Hebrews are Jews. So this isn't Judaism of the Jews, it's faith of Abraham, the Hebrew, like the New Testament says. Thus, Hebrew roots.
Awesome. Thanks for was that an email or in the face or in the
that was a comment on YouTube.
Okay. Thank you. And that was Courtney.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Courtney. That very well written. I appreciate. I feel like
72. We just hit 72. Keep going.
I hear where you're coming from. I believe you might have misunderstood me. By the beginning there, I just said I have never met, right? I didn't say that if you're Hebrew roots, you should know Hebrew. And if I said something that pointed, then I would definitely retract that. My point was I had never met somebody, and I did make this eye comment that with the fact that it's called Hebrew roots, you'd think that knowledge of Hebrew language would be something that you would find rather than the things I've encountered, word pictures, sacred name, all sorts of stuff. So just to clarify on that, I would push back a little on that characterization, but where you go from that, that's fine. You would have to admit it is an innovation. It is an innovation to now call Hebrew roots. I think, like I said earlier, you'd be better with that logic just to use the term Hebrews. We are Hebrews, and it sounds like you do say that. But nobody in the first century was making that argument. No one in the early church were really interested. They called them, the point was B'nai Avraham. We are sons of Abraham. That's how Paul calls it. And they call it Israel, ultimately. They're looking to be Israel in what we would call an expanded Israel. That is the idea of the sitting at the table, back to table fellowship, which Caleb and I had a great discussion about earlier. In the Messianic age, like in Matthew 8, is many will come from the east and west and sit and recline at the table with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That this is the picture of the eschatological meal that we, in our table fellowship here in this world, we have Jews and Gentiles sitting together, which goes against not the Torah of Moses, but goes against the dogma, the traditions of men that had been built up. And that's what Yeshua eliminates, obviously. But nobody there, you'd probably admit that nobody in the first century was interested in using the term Hebrew to mean that. And there's actually a really good book by Meir Sternberg called I have it up there. Hebrews Throughout Cultures or something like that. And this is interesting too, because he asked this question. He says, why do people from England speak English? Why do people from France speak French? Why do people from Spain speak Spanish? But people from Israel speak Hebrew. And so this question of why is the name of our language different than the name of our country? And he's a scholar. He was a Talmudic prodigy, and then he became an academic, Meir Sternberg, and he written numerous scholarly books. The poetic, The Art of Biblical Poetry or something like that, Biblical Poetics. Anyway, point is, what is this term Hebrew? And in his discussion, he gets into why does Jonah in chapter 1 tell the people on the ship that he's a Hebrew? Or why in Egypt is Joseph called a Hebrew? And he gets into the use of the term Hebrew used for peoplehood throughout Tanakh, not just for Abraham, but throughout Tanakh, even into, he has ideas about why Paul says, I'm a Hebrew of Hebrews. And so there's an ethnic issue here. Well, Paul also says he's an Israelite, right? And he's also Jew. So it's okay. I don't have a problem if people are going to say, I'm a Hebrew and I'm different from Jews. That's fine. You're entitled. But our underlying point, I think, still needs to be addressed. Why Hebrew roots, A, and the issue of it seems to be a self-adopted term that then's projected on others without a clear statement or articulation of what is affirmed and what is rejected.